Many of my less than polite friends ask me, they said, so Frank, how does a greedy, selfish, self-centered, materialistic cardiac anesthesiologist from California end up chucking a good life, and trust me, we had a good life, and we both loved our jobs, and end up going to Africa? 5 years ago, my wife Susan and I decided to climb Mount Kilimanjaro for my 50th birthday. I went from being perfectly normal healthy into full-blown high-altitude pulmonary edema. The temperature was dropping and I started getting really cold, so we started shivering and shaking.
In spite of him being in such bad shape, he was concerned that I was cold. And so he tried to turn his body around to keep me warm that night.
I was pretty sure I was going to die. I looked down and my fingernails were completely blue, my lips were blue. So I told Capone, our guide, I said,
disappeared.
We've got to get down. He said, we can't because the face gets too I would do everything essentially the same. I have no regrets. I would never want to give this up. This is home and where I belong, what I should be doing. Just getting in and tackling it, it builds a momentum.
This is a people of incredible resilience and hopefulness and laughter.
I need Africa more than Africa needs me. So that's a very old, 10-year-old video. So when we, yes. Okay, don't ask me. So when we first went up there, we picked this spot for fame. You can see the little arrow there. It's right on the outer edge of the Ngorongoro crater. So, I mean, it's out in the boonies. It's really, really in the middle of nowhere. And we bought this old farm that was been terraced for farming but had absolutely nothing on it. And we then raised the money to build an outpatient clinic. And the outpatient clinic we opened in 2008 with 2 Tanzanian doctors and 5 Tanzanian nurses. Now, we started off that first year, we only saw 4,900 patients. But it was okay because we were just kind of learning things as we went along. So let me give you a little hint, tip, secret here that I'll repeat several times. Susan and I knew nothing about building a hospital, running a hospital, creating an NGO, running an NGO, none of that. Everything we did, we just sort of learned as we went along. So okay, one notch too many. So anyway, about 18 months before we set up practice in here, I'd been learning African medicine in Arusha. It was a town about 130 kilometers away. And while I was there, I sort of accidentally cured a couple of kids. One kid came in with epilepsy. I increased his phenobarbital, went to BID dosing, and his seizures quit. Miraculous, amazing. And this young woman came in with incapacitating chest pain, and I figured out it was anxiety. We dealt with that, and she was cured. And so the word kind of spread. So I kind of got to be known all over Tanzania as the guy that could fix anybody. If you had a broken head, go see the fat, bald, white guy, because he can fix it. So one day, very shortly after we opened up the clinic, Pastor Temba, he was a Lutheran minister that did a lot of outreach. He shows up in one of these Toyota Land Cruisers, and he has 24 patients crammed inside. 21 of them were untreated epileptics. 3 of them were full-blown psychotics. So they all get out of the Land Cruiser, cruise over to the window to register. Immediately, 2 of them fall down on the ground and go into these major full-blown grand mal seizures. The 3 psychotics wandered off listening to whatever voices they were listening to that day. And so I thought, well, I might as well start in on the epileptics, at least the ones that were thrashing around on the ground. So we started working on those. A little while later, one of my staff members comes in and goes, Dr. Frank, you may want to come outside and see this. I think they're casting out devils. And I thought, well, cool, I hadn't seen that in a while. So I walk outside, and sure enough, there's one of my psychotic patients on the lawn, just behind the clinic here, on the lawn, thrashing around very dramatically. And equally dramatically was this guy casting out devils. He was apparently one of the family members of one of our other patients, and he just fancied himself a expert at doing exorcisms, so he was working on casting out the devils. Now, I had never seen this before, and I wasn't really sure exactly what I should do or how I should deal with it. So I thought, well, let me just move up a little closer and watch for a while, see what's going on. So there was a guy standing there clutching a Bible. And so I moved up, stood beside him, because I thought, you know, if this exorcism goes bad and there's wild devils flying around, probably standing next to the guy with the Bible should be one of the safer places to be. So I stood next to the guy with the Bible. He turns to me and he goes, "Hi, my name's Paolo. I'm a missionary." And the first thought I had was, okay, we send our missionaries to Africa from the U.S. Where does Africa send their missionaries? So I started talking to him. I said, "Oh, yeah, I've heard about you guys. You kind of travel around to developing countries and you find natives that are in great need and you work with them." And he goes, yeah, that's what we do. And I said, "So where have you been working?" He said, "Texas." So I said, "Well, I lived in Texas for 3 years, and trust me, if there's any natives in a developing country that need help, it's Texans. So God bless you, keep up the good work, and we'll see you later." So for 3 years, this was our only building on the whole place. It just kind of grew slowly, but not too bad. And then all of a sudden, after 3 years of just this one lone building standing there, it's kind of like we reached a tipping point, and all hell broke loose. We started getting funding for everything. And so we built a new laboratory, we built a new hospital, we finished up the operating rooms. Now, here's where we got to kind of a tricky part, because for the whole time we'd been working there, 5 years or so, the staff and the community had been really begging us to open up labor and delivery and start delivering babies. And we thought we couldn't do that until we had an operating room, because if you have an emergency. So in January of 2014, we actually did our first surgery. Now, this sort of was almost like an existential crisis for me, because I knew we kind of really needed to be delivering babies, but it scared the dickens out of me. I'm not an obstetrician, I'm not a neonatologist, and I knew when you combined pregnant ladies and tiny little babies, there was going to be trouble. And I kind of kept putting it off as long as I could, because I knew this was really serious. This was going to be, I think, more trouble than anybody realized. But they kept after me and kept after me and kept after me. So finally, they kind of dragged me kicking and screaming into the opening up, doing labor and delivery. So on September 25, I put it off for 8 months, and I just couldn't put it off anymore. So September 25, we opened up labor and delivery, and that was our first baby was born. And it went kind of smooth, you know, everything went well. She came in, went into labor, popped the baby out, and it was not a big deal. And I thought, well, maybe this isn't such a big deal after all. Maybe I was worried for nothing. So then on Friday, October 10, Zainabu leaves her home in Ngorongoro Crater. She's due to deliver, very pregnant. She knows she's past due, doesn't know why, and so she thinks, well, let's go to Fame and find out. As she's leaving her village, she's attacked by a Cape buffalo twice. As she's running to get away, she falls, lands on her stomach, partially tears the placenta away from the uterine wall, starts bleeding massively. By the time she gets to Fame, she's almost bled out. Her hemoglobin is around 3. We also discover she has severe preeclampsia, and we weren't sure she was going to make it. We raced her in to an emergency C-section, and that was our first C-section. Now, I'm saying to myself, I told you so. This is serious stuff, you guys. We should have taken this more seriously. And then I thought, well, maybe that was just an anomaly. Maybe it'll settle down and be a little more normal. So Unfortunately, that was not the case. Reality came slamming, hit us right in the face. The next 6 deliveries we did were all obstetrical emergencies, and 3 of them had to go to a C-section. Now, in case some of you aren't familiar, what the reality is in Tanzania is that every hour a pregnant woman dies due to complications of pregnancy or childbirth. And it's not just the mothers that are dying. A bunch of babies die too. 39,000 die every year, and a third of these are on the first day of birth. And if you do the math on that, that means every hour there's 4 to 5 babies dying in Tanzania. And all of a sudden, I anyway realized this was way more serious than even I had thought. Now, most of you guys are too young to recognize this, but there's a line from an old movie. So there's a Kiswahili phrase that means you need a bigger boat. And so this is what we were feeling like, oh my God, now what do we do? So let me just stop here a minute and kind of flash forward a few months, just hold that thought. In September of 2018, Lancet came out basically all about practicing medicine in developing countries. And they said, well, it's time for a revolution, that if you do lousy medicine, it's wasteful and unethical. And basically that if you can figure out how to do good medicine, you'll save over 8 million lives every year. That's a pretty big number. And they also, this was kind of interesting, they said poor quality care is a bigger barrier than insufficient access. For those of you who prefer plainer English, crap care is worse than no care, okay? And so if we had good care, we could get rid of half of all the maternal deaths every year, which, as you remember, was 1 every hour. So how do you, I know some of you guys are maybe interested in doing overseas medicine or something. So how do you get past this not everybody dying? How do you get good? How do you get good enough to not just become another statistic there? And this was really puzzling. So we actually, remember this how to build a bigger boat thing? So I'm trying to figure that out. How do we build a bigger boat? So I contacted our higher power, and which is Gabus, and put the word out, said we need some help building a bigger boat. Apparently she was listening, because within days, this old supermodel, Christy Turlington, she'd started an organization called Every Mother Counts. She contacted us and said, we'd like to partner with you and figure out how to save women's lives. And we thought, wow, just what we need. So we started in with her money and our ambition. We started this massive education system for all of our doctors and nurses. We brought in 2 professors of high-risk pregnancies, Dr. Pendo and Dr. Benjamin, and they actually taught all of our doctors this thing called structured operatives in obstetrics. And it was just a lot of education, including we found them beef hearts that are, apparently for any of you guys that are wanting to study OBGYN, apparently if you practice sewing on a beef heart, it's a lot like a uterus, just in case you're curious. You can just put that away. One of Frank's College of Obscure Knowledge tidbits. So then we took all the doctors and all the nurses and we put them through advanced life support training. And every single doctor and every single nurse went through advanced life support. Then we brought in Graham and Brad, 2 neonatal resuscitation experts, and using our little friends here, they taught every doctor and every nurse how to resuscitate a newborn baby. And then we realized, okay, we needed to start working on the mothers too. We'd get mothers coming in for delivery that would have a hemoglobin of 3 or 4. And so we realized we needed to get them earlier. So with the Every Mother Counts funding, we were able to set up a prenatal system where the mothers would pay basically $2.25, and they would get all of this lab work and tests and everything, and including a free month of hospitalization after delivery. So, we realized this is really, really good stuff. It's important, but how do you tell people about it? So we did this big outreach program. We went out into the villages, took our outreach team, and we went around and we visited all these traditional birth attendants and all these clinics and all these villages and all these little outpatient clinics, and it was wildly successful. We actually, our prenatal care program took off and just went crazy. And so to date, we've got 2,643 mothers have been signed up to prenatal care. Now, the problem with all this as we continued to grow is we became victims of our own success. We outgrew our labor and delivery. We were now up to 14 doctors, 55 nurses, and we were seeing over 26,000 outpatients every year. And so we had to go back to the drawing board, plan a new maternity center that had its own operating room and its own NICU, find a spot at the end of our existing hospital structures, and we started building a new maternity center. And it was finished before we left, but we haven't opened it yet. We're going to wait and open it when we get back. So now, what in real life terms, what does all this education and training and stuff mean? How does that translate into what happens in real life? Francisca is a 37-year-old traditional birth attendant. She came in to see us scared to death. She was due to deliver. She's a birth attendant. She knows all about this stuff. She had just discovered she had triplets. And in Tanzania, you don't survive triplets. Almost never do all 4 patients survive. If you're lucky, 2 out of 4 will survive, but more often than not, all 4 don't make it. And she was terrified. She was pretty sure this was a death sentence. Early the next morning, she went into labor. We rushed her into a C-section. We had just been wrapping up that very week all these training sessions with all our nurses and teaching neonatal resuscitation. So we were actually able to put together 3 teams that took one of each babies and did any resuscitation necessary, and everything went really smooth, and we were able to present mom with 3 very cute little babies. 2 girls and a boy, and that smile is kind of what we work for, why we do what we do. We gave her her life and 3 other little lives to boot, and that's what makes all that training worthwhile. Now, a lot of people ask me, what is different about practicing medicine in Africa versus the U.S.? So there's several different areas. The first one isn't really medical. It's just because of where we're located, right on the edge of the crater, which is a game park, you get these animals wandering around, and you're not on top of the food chain. You always have to keep that. We don't worry about it. We don't sweat it. These are all animals that have actually showed up on our property. We don't sweat it. We don't worry about it, but you just kind of have to keep it in the back of your mind. Now, the main medical difference, and it's a huge difference, more than you realize, is the fact that there are so few doctors in Africa. In the U.S., you guys have 1 doctor for roughly every 390. I don't know how current, this was a few years ago. 1 doctor for every 390 people. In Tanzania, you have 1 doctor for every 50,000 people. Now, unfortunately, most of those doctors want to work in a big city center. So when you get out to the rural areas, you end up with 1 doctor for every 100,000 people. Now, if you're a graphical kind of person, look at it this way. You're a US doctor, there's your patients. Not too bad. You can manage that. They don't all get sick at once. If you're a doctor in rural Tanzania, there's your patient load. And this is the part where it really gets dicey. Where we live, there's basically, for all practical purposes, nobody to refer to. So every single patient that comes through, you have to take care of it. Whether it's a person that has their guts hanging out from an elephant attack, whether it's a bowel obstruction, whether it's a very high-risk pregnancy, whether it's a trauma vehicle. We've had patients come in unconscious with subdural hematomas. We've had to do the burr holes. We've had them, I mean, just everything you can possibly imagine. Screaming psychotics, everything. There's nobody to refer to. As a rural Tanzanian doctor, you do everything. Absolutely everything. One story that always she's kind of a favorite of ours, is one day this woman came in. This is Bahati. Her aunt brought her in and basically gave her to us. Said her mom has remarried. Dad doesn't like this ugly, scaly, nasty looking thing, and he says he'll kill it. So mom gave us Bahati. So, and it was horrible. We asked around, we started sending photos everywhere, all over the world. Nobody really knew what this was. And to make it even worse, Bahati, she'd been laying in the fetal position for so long that all of her joints were completely frozen up in that position. You couldn't move her hands, fingers, elbows, shoulders, knees, hips, nothing, all frozen. And she was completely catatonic. No responsive life, no indication that she was in there at all. You could hit her, you could scream, you could yell, you could do anything, and she was absolutely non-responsive. So we couldn't find out what was wrong with her. Everybody all over the world, we got some replies back that said, well, we think it's this lamellar ichthyosis. So we started treating it as such, but it didn't get any better. So in the meantime, we started working with her, getting her joints working, started trying to get through that catatonia, and we ended up, Bahati lived with us for a full year. And towards the end of that, there was a visiting pediatrician brought the stuff along to do a punch biopsy. And we did a punch biopsy, sent it to 2 different medical centers in the US for their dermatopathology department to look at. And they said, oh, this is really weird. We've never seen it look like this, but what this is pemphigus foliaceus. Treat it with steroids. And that's what happened. That's what it turned out to be. So this is Bahati on her first day of school. We found a wonderful, loving home for her. Every time she comes in, and she comes in every month or 2 just to kind of follow up on her skin stuff. Every time she comes in, she runs up, jumps up in our arms, gives us a big hug, grinning from ear to ear. She has this amazing quick wit and humor, and she's just a funny, funny little kid. So what makes what we do worthwhile is like Francisca and her triplets. You give somebody basically 3 lives. Or Bahati, you give them back their life. And that is more rewarding than anything you guys can possibly imagine. That's it. Thank you very much. So, any questions? Come on, if there's not a single question, that means I've totally failed. And I don't deal with failure well. Oh.
What's the size of your service area in Tanzania?
Let me bring my Minister of Statistics up here. She can help. Actually, Karatu is 240,000 people, but what we found is the last few years, our fastest growing patient population is the Maasai from outside the district of Karatu. They've heard about the care. They come from up to 8 hours away, travel to us, and so we figure our catchment area is probably around 1.5 million, 1.2 million. And it's it's pretty intimidating. Yes?
Had you not gone through what was a life-threatening experience, do you believe you would have started the hospital in the treatment center?
Okay, the question is if I hadn't gone through my life-altering near-death experience, would I have still done it? The weird thing is, Susan and I have been, like I said, we had a good life. We both of us had, for the last 20 years before we left, had 3 months a year off, vacation, and we just traveled everywhere. And every time we'd come back, we'd go, wow, we need to simplify our lives and figure out how to start giving back. And it takes about 3 days, and you get sucked right back into that materialistic rut. And next thing you know, it's like, okay, that's such a cool car. I need that new motorcycle. Look at this Picasso. That needs to be on my wall. And I would probably still be stuck in that same seductive materialistic rut if someone hadn't slammed me between the eyes.
Are you able to incorporate any traditional or folk medicine?
That's interesting because virtually all of our patients come and they are either have been or are currently going to a traditional healer. Like if they complain of right upper quadrant pain, you look and there's all these little cut marks there. They've been going to a traditional healer. So we actually work with, in fact, I've had a number of the traditional healers come in as patients, and we work with them. We're very careful never to poo-poo or put it down or ridicule or anything. We just say, that's great. If it's working, wonderful. If you're finding it's not working like you'd like, come let us try what we do. So we have worked with them sort of concurrently.
While the work you do is amazingly important and phenomenal, I have a question about how do you scale up something of the sort that you are doing? Is it even possible to scale it up, or do you need 1,000 other Dr. Franks and Susans? This may be a question which Ruan, whom I met last night, might be able to also chime in to.
Do you want to try? Well, while they're thinking about it, let me just say this. So we've actually, as you might expect, we've gotten tons of requests. We have requests from Kenya, we have requests from Burundi, we have requests from Uganda to come replicate ourselves. And what we've discovered is to do what we do and keep the level of quality up that we feel is necessary is really pretty intense. And we're just not sure we have the stamina to do it all over again, because we purposely grew just very, very slowly as we thought we could keep and you know, like I said, when we got into delivering babies, we thought we were ready. It's like, yeah, everybody's ready to do this. And then we realized, whoa, we're not ready. And so to scale it up much would be a huge, huge thing. And I don't know, you know.
I do think that, you know, sort of an indirect way of answering your question is I do think we have a model that can be replicated. It would morph into something else depending on the community in Tanzania, because not all communities are the same there. And of course the Tanzanian healthcare providers that would be providing the services. But I do think and that's what we're getting asked about more and more is, can you language what it is you're doing here? Can you, make this put this in a way that somebody could at least learn from this model and do it somewhere else? And I think we can and have done a bit of that already.
But to scale it up, you also sort of need fundraising to generate resources, and that's why I thought that the fundraising work that you, the fundraising sort of machinery that you have established is working quite well.
So we just to give you a rough idea, up until last year, Susan and I had done all the fundraising, and then we hit every year. We kind of plateaued at 1.4 million, year after year, 1.4 million. Well, budget didn't plateau. It kept going. So next year our annual budget is 2.3 million. So obviously 1.4 wasn't going to cut it. So we've now kind of upgraded. We brought Rowan into the picture. She's now involved in the U.S. end of things and helping us set up and do things. So, but you're right. So to come up with 2.3 million every year is a huge undertaking. And if we suddenly got way, way bigger, that's going to be a lot more money we'd have to do. So unless we keep, those of us in the nonprofit world kind of live in fantasy lives. And we kind of all imagine that Jimmy Buffett's going to come on safari and he's going to get deathly ill and we'll lead him to believe that we saved his life and then he will fund us forever. Jimmy who? Warren Buffett. Wait, one guy's big on margaritas, one guy's big on money. And I don't remember which one it is. Oh, wow. Yes.
How do you combat the sense of becoming overwhelmed with the need? You walk into that huge coliseum with hundreds of thousands of people, it would scare most people away. How do you do it?
Well, you
Go
can
ahead.
answer this directly, but I do think that, we've surrounded ourselves with some just amazing, extraordinary Tanzanian healthcare providers and individuals. And I know that when you were first dealing with this as a clinician, it was some of the Tanzanian doctors that just kind of helped him keep it in perspective. Go ahead.
Because there's always, over there's always going to be way more need than you have the ability to handle. And so they would just, the Tanzanian doctors and nurses would just say, relax, Dr. Frank, we can only do so much at a time, and that's what we do. So, and you kind of get used to that. But you run into things that we just call the heartbreak of Africa, where you realize that that's just too much, you can't handle it. You can't save everybody's lives. And that's just the reality of it. Okay.
Questions. One is orthopedic care, pediatric orthopedic care, and then the other one is the infrastructure for financing and empowering, building things of their own sort of setup economically. You guys delve into that at all?
Now, yeah, I'll do the orthopedic part. We'll split it. When I was 4 years old, I decided I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon, and that lasted all the way through till my senior year in medical school when I got stuck with an orthopedic rotation where the guy did nothing but bad backs. And after 6 weeks of listening to fat, whiny Americans want total disability, I couldn't do that. But I still have a soft spot in my heart for orthopedics, and there's a huge, huge need over there. Unfortunately, cooler heads prevail. The boss, the real boss, said we can't just be fabulous at everything. We have to narrow our scope down and pick things that we can really be good at. And so when we did our 5-year plan a couple of years ago, we decided it would be labor and delivery and general surgery. And we figured we just did not have the personnel and the time and the money to branch into orthopedics. So that has been put on hold, even though I always have a love for orthopedics.
And we do have, even though very few people can afford to go anywhere else, there are some orthopedic teams about 3 hours away from us that we can refer to in a crunch. We can find sponsorship, and so that's generally what we do. We do have X-ray available now, so we're able to, at least get something diagnosed before we refer them on.
Wait, he had a second question.
The second question was about infrastructure and financing the whole thing. Yeah.
Empowering the local community
Right.
to set up.
Well, our central to our mission is the capacity building piece. For us, it is all about empowering Tanzanians and medically trained people who have simply worked in broken systems, but are talented and patient-centered and really want to contribute their expertise and their knowledge, but simply have never had the equipment or the resources or anything, or professional development even, to be able to do that. So that's been one of our priorities from day one, is to make sure that we have a very rigorous on-campus continuing medical education program via volunteers from specialties in the U.S. that come over and volunteer, and then also sending people off for upgrade trainings and things within Tanzania. So, so yeah, the education and capacity building part of all of this is really central to what we're doing over there.
But one of the big drawbacks is, you know, where we live, out in rural, it's probably one of the poorest parts of Tanzania you'll ever find. You know, like the average income is $2 a day, and it's you know, people barely can survive, barely buy food, let alone spend money on their health. So you don't get a lot of them donating money to help build things.
Emil asked about scaling up, but I have a question about how you even get started in the first place, because you had to navigate the government, the regulations, the bureaucracy, and then you had the cultural issues to overcome, the differences. And so can you talk a little bit about that early process?
I think if people had told us early on what we'd have to go through, we'd have probably run the other way as fast as we could. Because basically everything we did was totally outside of our comfort zone. We had no idea. You know, in fact, after 2 years, I was pretty convinced that if you looked up "doesn't know jack shit" in Wikipedia, you'd find my picture. Because every time I came into something, I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. And so it was a matter of just like, well, somebody will figure it out. Let's try and see if we can make it work. So it was kind of maybe a little bit of stubborn stupidity that just made us keep hacking away at it, even though we didn't know what we were doing.
Well, and I think too, the first couple of years were very, very difficult, because you could tell that the local government and even the community to a certain extent were very used to sort of big A dropping down for a couple of years and rolling out a project and then disappearing, all right, saying, sustain it, you know, keep it going. And so it really took us the first couple of years, I think, to demonstrate that we were there to grow roots and to make it our home. And then the more, you know, obvious it became that we were surrounding ourselves with a Tanzanian team, I think all those variables came into play as far as the community really embracing what we were doing, and the government, you know, ultimately, the local government ultimately embracing what we were doing.
Wow. All of a sudden everybody's, okay. You. Jean jacket.
Sorry, I'm like a little sick, but I was wondering if you
Hey,
could
wait.
elaborate.
We're used to dealing with little sick. In fact, we can handle that.
Okay, wonderful. I was wondering if you can elaborate. It's kind of an extension of the previous question, but I wanted for you to elaborate on the pros and cons of meeting your medical objectives with your medical center through an NGO. Did you feel that you were more able to meet those objectives with the NGO as opposed to, say, a government facilitated facility of sorts?
Well, okay, let me just give you my experience. So when we first moved to Karatu, there is a government hospital 10, 15 kilometers away. And I actually had the thought, should we build it ourselves, or should we partner up with this existing hospital and see if we can make it better? And so I went over and I made an appointment, and I talked with everybody over there, all their administrator and a whole bunch of people on the hospital board and everything. We all talked together, and they were like, yeah, come, please, come help us. And then so we broke up for the day, and over the next 24 hours, 4 of these people contacted me privately and said, do not try to partner with this hospital. The system is way too broken. You'll just be pouring your money down the toilet. It'll be a complete waste of time and effort, and it'll just frustrate you. Do your own thing, keep full control of it, and it'll be a lot less stressful for you. So we took their advice, and we're probably glad we did, because we've seen some other examples where they tried to do it the other way, and it just hasn't really worked all that well.
Actually, my question really concerns, well, first, how do they earn that $2 a day? And then how do they contribute to their care? You said they do some, I mean, they're not bringing you vegetables, they're paying in some way, right? Or is this a total charity?
No. It's fee for service.
Yeah, we are a fee-for-service clinic, but we have certain groups that receive essentially free care, like vulnerable groups, like our prenatal program is highly subsidized. But even our local rates are highly subsidized. And then we have a couple of social workers who help us do financial assessments on patients who need reduced rate care or fee waivers above and beyond that. But still, we generate about 26% about 26% of our operating costs are covered by patient fees for service. So that's not bad. You know, $475,000 in 2018 was patient fees for service. We also, we obviously are at an advantage in that we are located in a place that all tourists have to travel through our little village to get to the Serengeti, to get to all the big major game parks. And so the safari guides have gotten to where they bring them our way, and we charge them more. So we have a sliding scale.
So yeah, you can ask Tony or Cindy. We gouge the crap out of any tourist we can. And we're honest about it. We just said bend over. We'll try to make this painless, but.
I think that's probably one of the reasons you're so successful is that you did not make it an entire a charitable thing, that they are actually paying for some of their care.
Well, they can expect more too, and that I think gives them a certain amount of dignity.
Of course it does, and then that spreads. It's not. There's just something about being able to contribute something and not just get it for free.
And I gotta tell you, we were pretty naive about that in the beginning. When you saw those early mobile clinic shops, we did try to do that mobile clinic for free. And despite our Tanzanian staff saying, no, we need to charge something. It's like, no, we can't. The donors won't like that, And, we had to learn the hard way. And eventually we were charging, 500 shillings. But I mean, it was something. And it made all the difference. So.
Way in the back.
We'll have to hold it. Okay, thank you. I will start by deeply appreciating your services to the people of Africa, Tanzania in particular. I'm African, and I could relate to a lot of the stuff you presented in your lecture today. My question is this: time, great time. Time comes when senescence sets in and you will be going for retirement. What are your plans for sustaining this effort?
It's funny because we never got this question until about 3 or 4 years ago. We'd had a really rough spell, and so when we showed up in the U.S. to fundraise, both of us looked like death warmed over. And all of a sudden, people started looking at us and going, "What's your secession plan?" Like they weren't sure we were going to make it out there that day. Well, I'm going to do this for, I'd say, 50 more years is kind of my plan, plus or minus. Susan, about the same. But no, we actually have started working. We're grooming. We have the most amazing Tanzanian medical team you can imagine. We have a young guy we're grooming to be our hospital administrator. He's finishing up his master's degree in health systems management. And he's been our HR guy for years, and he's just awesome. So we're slowly working on building up all the management pieces through the whole hospital. Done a real emphasis on improving management skills. The one thing that we're still toying with, what's going to be the best way to handle it, is the fundraising part.
Which we talked about recently, and Rowan is going to be playing a huge role in that now that we have her on board. She is going to be working with 2 or 3 of our Tanzanian staff on how to fundraise, how to understanding donor psychology and people's relationship to money, and how to come over here and talk about fame in a way that is compelling. So we are, and as far as the hospital running, it runs, and that's exactly in our absence, because we're on a fundraising tour now for 8 weeks, and we do this every year, and things carry on because
the department heads know what they're doing, and the clinicians know what they're doing, and that's exactly, you know, what we intended from the beginning. So the fundraising U.S. arm is going to be the harder piece to build.
First of all, I admire what you do, and thank you.
Oh, thank you.
What kind of surgical services do you provide?
Huh.
Logistics, if you want to have a volunteer from here going all the way down.
Are you a surgeon?
Yeah.
Ooh. What's your
I do a little bit of everything.
wow.
I'm a trauma acute care, and I have a fellowship in minimally invasive. I do a little bit of OB. The last delivery I had probably 25 years ago, but I still know what to do.
Wow. Okay, the interesting thing about, I'll try to keep this really quick. The interesting thing about Tanzania, we have, like I said, 14 Tanzania doctors. None of them have any specialty training. It's medical school, year of internship. They're expected to do everything. And so obviously they can't be wonderfully gifted surgeons. We've partnered with Creighton University, who has come out with a global surgery fellowship, basically teaches general surgeons how to do all the things that general surgeons don't normally do in the US. And the second year of the fellowship, they send them to us, and they work with us. So we've had a very experienced, very good board certified general surgeon for the last year working with our team. And so she has been working with our surgeons and slowly has them to where she'll tell us this one, this one, this one, you know, is doing gallbladders, they're doing bowel resections, they're doing, you know, bowel obstructions, hernias, you know, pretty much all the basic surgeries. And because what it boils down to is if we don't do it, nobody does, and the patient dies. So you have to try something. So that's one of the areas, I said the two areas we're really working on in our 5-year plan is labor and delivery and general surgery. So we have a good group of anesthetists, 4 anesthetists that do a really great job, but we're always continually teaching and working with them. But we love to have visiting surgeons come over and spend time with our guys, and basically they just work with them every day and kind of just help them, mentor them.
So when going to a different continent, let alone a different country, there's definitely that culture clash and maybe even a level of distrust or fear among your patients. How did you establish that level of trust and overcome that culture clash?
Yeah, I know I probably better answer that one. When I first showed up 15 years ago in Arusha, I went to work at this little clinic just to kind of learn African medicine. And the very first day there, I met with all these African doctors. When I walked in there, the hostility, the distrust, the suspicion was so thick it was palpable. You could just cut it. And when they finally figured out that I was there to learn, not there to show them the great white father had come in to save them and teach them how to do it, they became wonderful and they worked together, and it's all your attitude. And we noticed this in volunteers coming over. We have, I don't know if you guys realize this, but there's a rumor out there that the occasional doctor has ego problems, just occasional, not everybody. And so we get some volunteers coming over, and some of them are kind of egotistical and just, they have problems. The ones that come over with sort of, I'm here to learn as much as I am to teach, our staff loves them. You know, they just eat it up. They just fit right in, and they're wonderful. So it's all about, if you can pack your ego up and put it away while you come over, you do really, really well.
And the other thing that comes to mind in response to that question is we have lots of different tribal groups in our area, and we try to have representation amongst the staff so that when people come in, they can speak in their mother tongue, and not all of them speak Kiswahili, which is the national language. So, you know, we make sure we have translators that speak Kimasai and Kiarak and the various represented tribes there.
What are some parting words about what we...
Basically, you're saying we've talked long enough? Is that noise I just heard, your stomach growling? Sorry.
Yes, what are some parting words about what we can learn within the U.S.
The one part, in fact, a guy, there was an old 70-year-old ER doc came through on Safari just looking around and all, and he said he just retired, and I said, whoa, we'd love to get ER docs do great over here. We'd love to, why don't you come over and volunteer? And he said, Frank, I've practiced CYA medicine. Everybody knows what that is? I've practiced CYA medicine for so long, I don't know if I even know how to practice real medicine anymore. And that's the one I've kind of wrestled with that a lot, and how to get over that hump. Because I talk to a lot of US doctors, and that's kind of their one thing is like, a patient comes in and like right now, me, this is why I love working over there, comes in and is like, oh yeah, you got this problem. I know that without even sending you to the lab. In the US, they'd have to get a CAT scan and so if we could figure out a way to just keep it simple. I mean, it's amazing how much good we can do with such little resources over there. If we could figure out a way to turn back the clock a ways. Okay, I think that was a big hint from her that we're supposed to wrap this up now. Now we're gonna be here, because as long as there's food around, an African will stay there. Well, if you put out food, I'll be there till the food's gone. So we'll be out there. Just, I gotta warn you, step to the side when you talk to me, because I'll be shoveling food, and you don't want to get hit.
And I need to say thank you to you people. First of all, thank you all for being here and carving out the time to attend this presentation. We really appreciate it. But Frank and I would also like to thank Deborah Diaz, the Dean of School of Medicine, Anil Dela Ikar. Where did he go? Where did he go? Oh, he did, shoot. The Dean of School of Public Policy, and Cindy Giorgio, the Associate Chancellor Emeritus, for co-hosting this event and coordinating everything and getting the word out to you guys, and just being really wonderful ambassadors for what we're doing in Tanzania. Thank you very much.
Oh, just real quick. If any of you go, wow, this is really cool. I have all this money I don't know what to do with, and these guys are really amazing. I would like to help them. And we accept precious stones, stocks, bonds, diamonds, anything. There's cards and envelopes out on the table in the back. If you go, well, I don't have much money, but I got this really rich next door neighbor that's looking for something, have the information.
Well, thank you.